Hello everybody, welcome to this amazing game of Dauntless. Today we're going to go over the tutorial of the War Pike, how to use it, what it's for, and anything you can learn about it for you to get started. Afterwards we'll solo a Pangar while giving tips to fighting a Pangar and tips to the War Pike itself. Currently I'm using an Xbox controller, so that'll be the controls you see for this, but the piercing attacks are our light attacks and the harvesting attacks are heavy. The piercing light attacks can be chained up to 5 times, with the 5th attack being a double strike. If you hold the button for the 5th attack, instead it will do a flurry of attacks until you let go. Each flurry strike costs stamina, while basic light attacks don't. If you input a sideways directional command while using a light attack, you'll strafe and strike at the same time. You can do this up to 4 times before the 5th attack, which will require you to finish with a flurry. If you tap in the opposite direction that your character is facing while making the directional attack, instead of strafing, he'll make a 90-degree turn to the right, which will allow you to position yourself for more accurate strikes. These sideways strafes cost stamina, while the 90-degree turns are free attacks. Each successful light attack also increases your special meter by a little. Heavy harvesting attacks are up next. These are longer animated attacks, which means you can't dash out of them until the animation is done. These piercing attacks are a lot faster and a lot safer. However, harvesting attacks build your meter significantly faster. It should be noted that your special meter increases your physical damage the more it's built up. Therefore, building it with harvesting attacks is a good idea to dish out quite a bit of damage. The special meter may also grant you damage, but if you take damage, you lose 50% of your current meter. Therefore, you really need to consider whether it's worth committing to a harvesting attack to build for the meter, or to use light piercing attacks so you can easily maneuver out of the way of danger. The light piercing and heavy harvesting attacks can be combined in any order. It's very wise to experiment with how many attacks you can get in between, as both will have to eventually end with a finisher. If you end with the harvesting attack finisher, that will cost you a lot of time and you will be unsafe while making the attack. Therefore, you need to be able to count and make sure that when you commit to the harvesting finishing attack, that it is safe for you to do so. This can help control your stamina cost as well as your meter gain as you interchange the attacks to better fit the situation. So let's talk about the special ability. The special meter is filled up by using both piercing and harvesting attacks. Piercing attacks do fill the meter, but at a much smaller rate, whereas harvesting attacks can make multiple hits on multiple limbs and also gain more meter per each individual hit. Of course, each harvesting attack costs stamina, so you must be wary of what you're using in order to keep yourself a little bit of stamina to stay evasive. After getting the meter past at least the first white bar, you could tap the special ability to do an Etheric Conversion. This will convert all stored energy into a single Pike Blast missile. For each tier of energy you pass on the special meter, the more damage your Pike Blast missile will do. This will also be indicated on the missile icon once you store the energy, as it will be brighter when you store more energy. Hold the special button in order to perform a Pike Blast. This is a long-ranged attack that shoots a missile out, dealing heavy damage to parts. The amount of damage it does to a wounded part is insanely high, making it the bread and butter for the Pike. You can charge up to 3 missiles at any given time and hold on to them up until you blast them. The meter after the 3rd missile will still build up, therefore you can hold that charge for as long as you don't take damage for the damage boost it grants to all your other attacks. There's also one secret move I don't perform in the Pangar video called the charge attack. This is done by holding the light piercing button while sprinting. As long as you hold the button, you will begin a sprint which consumes stamina the further you go. Upon contact with the enemy, it does do a lot of wound damage and some basic attack damage. It also seems to fill the bar up substantially, and you can combo out of it after the brief impact stun. Now let's take a look at what the Pike is meant to do and how it synergizes on a team. So the Pike is known to be a very supportive weapon, as it is one of the only weapons that naturally causes wound damage. Wound damage is the red damage that you see along with the yellow damage when striking with a Pike. Enough damage that stacks against a part, it will eventually begin to glow blue and have a kind of fiery effect coming out of it. That means the part is fully wounded. The benefit to wound damage is that it does not apply to a behemoth's overall health. meaning that you will not kill them with wound damage. Instead, wound damage only exists until a part is wounded, and once fully wounded, no more wound damage can be applied. This is very useful to allow everyone to deal maximum part damage while keeping the behemoth's health in control. This helps to break parts without defeating the behemoth too fast. The pike is not only a fantastic support weapon, but it does substantial damage on its own. The downfall is that the pike is unable to perform any kind of stagger damage, therefore it relies heavily on wound support damage, but the pike blast is capable of interrupting rush attacks on the behemoths that rush towards you. This will be the only way that a pike user can stagger a behemoth without breaking apart. It is up to a pike user to apply as many wounds to as many limbs as possible in order to give as many parts as possible at the end of the hunt. Bringing both a hammer or axe user along with the pike makes for a devastating combo, as they can easily stagger a behemoth and break every part on the body once they're wounded. Pike users can also protect their allies by managing their pike blasts and stunning the behemoths during their charge attacks. This can serve as the counterattack needed for axe and hammer users to follow up for additional part-breaking damage. Now we'll cover some tips on a solo fight against Pangar regarding the pike and all of its uses. Like any behemoth fight, it is very wise to roll into your opponent than it is to roll away from. Rolling away from the attack will likely result in you ending your roll in the middle of the attack. You'll end up taking damage, which it's very vital for you to make as minimal mistakes as possible. So rolling into the attack will cause the behemoth to roll past you, along with you completely avoiding the attack because you're invincible during the roll. With Pangar specifically, you'll always want to get in close. Staying to the sides or behind his feet will cause him to do stomps or snow kicks. These can be quick and dangerous, but if no one else is in your way, it's always good to aim for the feet when you can. His tail is another place for you to fight, as you can take the tail out first if you so wish, but this will not cause any alteration in his attacks. His tail will only cut off at the tip, and he will still be able to perform any and all tail attacks. When looking at the pike itself, we didn't cover that charging the pike blast itself is actually important. The longer you charge it, the more accurate the attack is, not more damage. The damage is when you convert the energy into the missile itself. However, overcharge it, you might cause it to misfire. Personally, I'm a fan of using the light attacks as they do not cost stamina, and as I mentioned before, I was not aware of the charging attack. So you'll see me walk up to my opponent and slowly get in there, but then use some stamina to do a rolling heavy attack. That will help me build a little bit of my charge meter while also consuming the stamina that I just saved up to get some decent damage in. The heavy attacks do deal a little bit more damage than the lights, but they are a bit slower. However, they are typically wide enough to hit multiple limbs. So after striking the leg for so long and causing enough wound damage, you'll notice it becomes scratched and begins to leak a bit of ether. This means that the part is wounded, and there it is. The ether is leaking, and then my pike shot will deal immense damage to this location, along with all of my party members, if they were here, dealing additional damage. And that additional damage also applies to me. Even though I've maxed out the wound damage, I still deal some part damage to it. Of course, once you've broken a part, you don't have to worry about dealing any more wound damage to it, as you'll just go back to dealing basic damage, and that applies to the total health of the behemoth. It's very important to note when you stock your pike blasts, because you do not always need to have the highest pike blast in order to make it an effective shot. Essentially, even the lightest of pike blasts will cause an interruption during a charge attack, or what they like to call a boop. I personally don't, but here you go, an interruption of a charge from a pike blast. Now that blast was not fully charged, but it was heavily charged. You could do it even with the smallest charge, for as long as you have a pike blast to interrupt, that can make the difference. So if you're having difficulty getting a full charge, feel free to make at least one small charge in order to go for an interruption when needed. As we go along with this fight, you'll notice that I'm not using very many heavy attacks, or at least I'm not going full force with heavy attacks, as the heavy attacks are a bit slow, and being by myself, it's even more dangerous since the monster is focused on me. the behemoth is going to use everything he can against me, and going full out into a triple heavy combo will almost guarantee me some damage. So you'll notice that I go for the light attacks even though they don't fill up my meter that much. But we can still go for the occasional heavy attack and interchange it into light attacks so that I keep myself safe and continuously poke at the behemoth's wound and part health. While fighting Pangar himself, at first I always thought he was difficult simply because of how big he was and how big his attacks were. But as we mentioned right off the start, it's very important that you roll into your enemy, and that's when Pangar got easy for me, is when I rolled into him, it was no problem. One very key moment though, as I went for that interruption right there, I'm not sure exactly what caused it, whether it was the rage, but I do know that if you use a Pike Blast against his back, there is a chance that it will deal nothing. In fact, if you were to shoot it at his back while he's standing, it will deal nothing. You have to hit his body, not his scales, which is very important. But also don't get discouraged when you miss about 5 strikes in a row. Just keep going at it. One more thing that I love to mention that I do a lot is that I use the flurry of piercing attacks far more often than I do the flurry of harvesting attacks. And this is because the piercing attacks will store a lot of energy since it hits so frequently, and it deals a hefty ton of damage along with a hefty ton of wound, on top of being a very safe move since you can jump out of the flurry of attacks. So you'll see that's what I go for here instead of the harvest attack. That helps keep my stamina high because that doesn't cost nearly as much as a harvest attack. The equipment I'm using for this fight is the Charog Pike and Scrave Armor. The Scrave Armor provides a bit of frost resistance, and I just wanted to be able to fight on the same level of people who would be fighting Pangar for their first time, so I'm not using any of my Maelstrom gear or my tier 5 weaponry or heroics. So the damage here is about what you should be expecting out of yourself when you get to Pangar, and these are the weapons you can use along with the armor. So the Pangar is weak to fire, and you can catch him on fire with a slew of heavy attacks, but because I'm by myself, I'm going to focus on the heavy attacks and use the piercing strikes as often as possible. So you'll notice that Pangar is right now completely covered in ice. This is his Aether form, and what this does is essentially causes his attacks to emit ice a little greater than his normal ones would. This is occurring because I did not break the scales when they became frozen. Essentially, once all of the scales on his back freeze over time, they will eventually turn him into this temporarily. You can prevent it by breaking the scale so that he does not 100% convert. However, failure to do so is not exactly a terrible thing, as it is manageable. While enraged, Pangar is far more aggressive and will unleash attacks at a higher frequency. It's a little harder to get attacks in at this time, so do be careful. But, as I said before, that frostback part is manageable. And what I mean is, not only can you handle the attacks, but after it fades after a period of time, he actually becomes stunned, and you can take advantage of that stun. And as you saw there with the Pike Blast, it dealt no damage, and that's because it happened to hit one of the scales on the back. Now, he also gets temporarily stunned by the lack of rage, so you gotta capitalize on it when you can. And as we mentioned before, the Pike does not have stagger, but the reason he staggered was because of a piece break, which was the leg. And so I'll only essentially get 2 of those major staggers, maybe 3 if the head counted as 1. So the Pike is really good at hitting these small spots as well. Getting in between Pangar's leg and head, you can get to the arm there and deal some decent damage. If you're having difficulty landing light piercing attacks on the arm, even though it's angled upwards, then you can always use a Pike Blast. On top of that, you can also cancel Pike Blasts. When you go to charge a Pike Blast, simply roll out of the attack and it will cancel it, allowing you to charge it up at a later time without having to waste it simply because you started charging. This can be very helpful. Don't forget that the Pike Blasts deal immense damage to wounded parts, so if you build up 3 really powerful shots and unload them onto a wounded part, you are more than likely to break that part at that time. It's a fantastic way to help yourself if you're by yourself, or to help an ally that might be struggling on breaking that part. Stamina conservation on the pike is very important. If you do not conserve your stamina correctly, you might not have the stamina in order to dodge out of the way of very vital and heavy damaging attacks. In order to recover stamina in the middle of combat, simply swap to piercing attacks only. Up until you get to the flurry, don't use the flurry as that will consume stamina. Harvesting attacks also consume stamina, which will stop the regeneration, but as long as you keep it to light attacks, you'll be able to regenerate the stamina until you have the need to roll, and then you'll have full stamina and then can begin consuming once again, getting the combos that you desire. Knowing a behemoth's set of attacks is very important, as you need to know what parts of the body are dangerous on that behemoth while they perform that attack. A lot of the time that you fight Pangar, you'll notice that I stay close to the feet, and that's because his feet are easily telegraphed, as well as easy to dodge for as long as it's not the snow sweep. That one is very quick and can deal some decent damage if you're not paying attention. The tail itself can also be a bit dangerous. For example, when he does the tail swing, the tail is dangerous on the way it swings and on the way back until it goes stationary. You have to be aware of both swings in order not to deal damage. As you see, I got hit on the way back, which can be very dangerous. Be wary and be ready to dodge 2 attacks. As we wrap this battle up, let's give a few more tips as to what I like to use with the pike. In order to get a full charge on my pike shot, I use the flurry attack more than I use the harvesting attack. This is because the flurry attack is easy to use and is always safe, therefore it deals a lot of damage. I can always prevent my own damage by rolling away when I need to, and then I get what I need in. And to be honest, it does fill the meter up plenty for me to get the job done. Using the pike's swiftness, you need to make sure you're dealing damage as often as possible, but make sure that you keep yourself safe at all times. Stamina management is very vital if you wish to win with the pike. And that's all I have for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for watching. If you haven't already, check out the hammer tutorial if you're interested in learning how to use the hammer and any tips I can give regarding that. I want to thank you all for all the love and support you've given me. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always, good game.